Have you ever wondered how humans learn language? Why students in group projects sometimes tend to slack off? Or how to harness your memory to study better for an exam? These questions and many others are addressed by the field of psychology, which is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. In this video, we will discuss different perspectives of psychology throughout history. Each of these perspectives has its own strengths and limitations. However, all of these perspectives have helped to shape the field of psychology into what it is today. Throughout history, people have always been interested in the study of other people. Ancient Greek philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were interested in the human mind, the power of reason, and the nature of reality. Socrates is credited with creating a method for inquiry about the human condition, the Socratic method. This means that we can take a complex problem or issue and break it down into smaller pieces, ask questions about them, self-reflect on those questions, and then put the pieces back together again to understand the bigger picture. Plato was most associated with notions that our knowledge of the world is innate, or that we're born with it, and that we act on this knowledge to the best of our ability. In contrast, Aristotle advocated for the notion of a blank slate at birth, and the idea that all humans learn about their worlds and create their knowledge based on experience. All of these perspectives helped to create psychology as a science in the late 1800s and early 1900s and led to the onset of two very important trends in research, structuralism and functionalism. Wundt, really considered the father of psychology, and Titchener helped to establish modern psychology as a separate field of study. They advocated for an approach called structuralism, meaning that we should study the basic elements that make up conscious mental experiences, or atoms of the mind. They believed in the power of introspection, which is a method of self-observation in which participants report their thoughts and feelings as a way to understand the basic elements of thought. But as the field of psychology grew, additional important thinkers advocated for a second major approach to understanding human behavior called functionalism, meaning that we should study the purpose that behavior serves, how that behavior is adaptive or maladaptive, and how we are regulated by the influences around us. William James, the first American psychologist, helped establish this functionalist perspective. While at Harvard, James also tutored Mary Culkin, who would go on to become the first female president of the American Psychological Association. My guess is that even before taking this class, you have probably heard of Sigmund Freud. Perhaps the most famous psychologist, Freud was actually a neurologist working in Vienna during the late 1800s. His work with patients led him to speculate about the importance of the unconscious mind, as well as the connection between childhood experiences and adult personality. Freud did not use the scientific method, which we'll cover in the next module, to test his ideas. Rather, he relied on subjective interpretations of his observations with patients. As a result, many of his ideas are not really accepted by psychologists today, either having been disproven or being impossible to test empirically in the first place. However, Freud still had an influential impact on different fields of psychology, including personality and clinical psychology. And psychologists today do recognize that some of the broad takeaways of Freud's ideas, such as the general importance of non-conscious processes, do have some scientific merit. Frustrated with the rather unscientific approaches of psychoanalysis, some psychologists in the early to mid-1900s started to place greater emphasis on running rigorous, controlled experiments. This gave rise to the behaviorism perspective, which focused on measuring outwardly observable behavior, hence the name. As a rule, behaviorists avoided acknowledging the importance of inner mental processes. They believed that the mind was an unknowable black box, and therefore could not be studied using rigorous empirical methods. One famous behaviorist was B.F. Skinner, who introduced the concept of reinforcement and punishment. You've probably heard the terms positive and negative reinforcement used before, although the term negative reinforcement is actually a bit of a misnomer. Often when people use the term negative reinforcement, what they actually mean is punishment. While behaviorism did much to advance our understanding of both animal and human behavior, many psychologists were dissatisfied with its narrow scope. They wanted to broaden the field of psychology back to include the study of mental processes, such as memory and emotion. By the 1950s, new disciplinary perspectives in linguistics, neuroscience, and computer science were emerging, and these areas revived interest in the mind as a focus of scientific study. This ushered in the so-called cognitive revolution, where psychologists again began to study mental processes, albeit now with more modern scientific tools. The perspectives we have discussed thus far predominantly originated in American and European contexts. It's unfortunate that, with few exceptions, until very recently, psychologists did not fully acknowledge the importance that our cultural backgrounds can have on how we experience the world. However, more recent work by cultural psychologists has revealed that many classic findings conducted on so-called weird populations — WEIRD here is an acronym that stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic — does not translate to other people groups. For example, look at the following two lines. Although they are actually the exact same length — you can pause the video here and test it out yourself if you like — my guess is that the one on the top probably looks shorter to you. This is known as the Mueller-Lyer illusion. While this might seem like a very basic cognitive process, it turns out that the reason why your brain perceives the top line to be shorter is because of the many experiences you've had growing up with perfectly right-angled corners, like perhaps in the room you're in right now if you're watching this video indoors. For people who have grown up in developing nations, where these angled right corners are not common, this picture is actually not an illusion. They have no difficulty perceiving these lines to be the same length. Today, many more researchers recognize the importance of culture in influencing psychological phenomena and are making more of an effort to sample more broadly across different racial, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. There is also more of an effort to ensure that people from different backgrounds are not only included in psychological study samples, but are also doing the work of investigating themselves. People from different backgrounds might think to ask different kinds of questions, so it's important that the field of psychology as a whole represents these different perspectives.